Hello, welcome back to Offbeat Gyan. I'm Deepa, and today I will be talking about book 2 of A. Shivanandan's novel, When Memory Dies. In my earlier video, I had given you the description of chapters 6 to 9. The title mentioned 7 to 9, but I did do a little bit of a recap of chapter 6. So here I will be talking about chapters 1 to 4 of book 2 of When Memory Dies. The protagonist of book 2 is Rajan. Who is Rajan? Rajan is Sahadevan's son. Sahadevan is a Tamil and he belongs to the village of Sandlipe in Jaffna, which is in the northern part of Sri Lanka. So Rajan is the narrator of book 2 of When Memory Dies. This is a first person account by Rajan. Rajan tells us that he was born on a rainy monsoon night in December 1930. He doesn't remember much about his childhood. He tells us that Sahadevan, his father, was the postmaster of Badulla. Rajan's first memory is that of his friend Sanji, who had been thrown out of school because he did not have proper shoes. Rajan was not included in the children's group when he arrived in Badulla in the beginning. Children's groups, they are usually very closely knit and they have their own games, they have their own secrets and nicknames. And it's very difficult to gain an entry into such a little group. Over a period of time, Rajan got an entry into the group with a ball that he had got from his uncle. He used to sit and watch the boys play, and gradually they allowed him to join the group. Sanji and Rajan, they studied in the same English medium school. Sanji was the son of a shopkeeper. The shopkeeper's name was Raman. Raman had managed to escape the bonded labor of the tea estate by setting up a pettikada, a small shop. The shop was not very well off and all, but he managed to send Sanji to a English medium school. All the other members of Sanji and Raman's family, they were employed in the tea estate. So Raman had grand plans for his youngest son, Sanji. He wanted his son to escape from the life of the tea estate. And the other members of the family also supported him in this dream. So what happened was both of them, they studied in the same school along with another friend called Lucky. And Lucky and Rajan, they used to read a lot of stories. Sanji's real name, that was Sanjeevan. But when Raman wanted to register his son's name as Sanjeevan, the old high caste clerk, he shortened the name. From Sanjeevan, he reduced it to Sanji because he felt that such a grand name is not suitable for a low caste laborer's son. And that is how Sanjeevan became Sanji. Now, Raman had a good repertoire of stories, a collection of wonderful stories. So, Rajan and Lucky and Sanji, they used to go from school, have lunch at home, and they used to meet at Raman's shop. And they used to listen to the old man's wonderful stories. Stories that took them out of that tiny world of the tea estate and the life in Badulla. So when Sanji was in the second standard, his father, Raman, passed away. And with that, Sanji's luck also failed. His family could no longer support him. They could not send him to an English medium school. So he was sent to the Tamil school, which was meant for the children of the coolies or the laborers. With that, there was a drift between Rajan and Sanji. And soon what happened? They also moved out of Badulla. Sahadevan got another transfer. And why did Sahadevan get the transfer? He was somebody with an activist mentality. And he had written a petition to Mr. Watson, the postmaster general. on behalf of the underpaid postmen. And that is why this man, Mr. Watson, who was very vindictive, he took revenge by sending off Sahadevan to a malarial station, a remote interior station in Sri Lanka, which was infested with mosquitoes. And that was a period which was really bad for Rajan because he kept on falling sick and he kept on suffering from malaria. That was a very difficult period for Rajan and his mother, Neela. And Rajan was actually tired of the wars he was fighting against sickness and disease. And he was also tired of his father because his father kept on getting into arguments and fights with higher authorities. And whenever there was something like this, he would get a punishment transfer and he would be sent to some remote place. And the entire family would have to travel and they would all suffer the consequences of Sahadevan's activism. So Rajan was tired of all these fights being waged over his head by his father. Soon, what happened? That bad phase it got over, and Sahadevan was transferred to Nuwara Eliya. And Nuwara Eliya was a wonderful place because its climate was really good, very pleasant kind of climate, and that was a happy period for Rajan. Rajan's health also returned, and things came back to normal. And Sahadevan, he decided that he is going to send his son Rajan to his old school, Saint Benedict's, which I have mentioned in the earlier video, if you remember. And Saint Benedict was in Colombo. And these people, they are in Nuwara Eliya. So Rajan would have to stay in Colombo and attend the school. So it was decided that Rajan would stay at his grandparents' house. Grandparents' house means Neela's house, Neela's mother's house. Neela's mother, she actually came from quite a well-to-do Tamil family and their family was settled in Kotahena in Colombo. So Rajan would be sent to that house. He would stay there and he would attend Saint Benedict School. That was the plan. So packing everything, all the preparations were done, uniform, everything was bought and he was taken to Colombo via train. Sahadevan had 5 children and it was actually very difficult for him to support Rajan's education in a Catholic school. But he was very interested in sending his son to an English medium school. And Neela's mother was a very domineering, rude, and patronizing woman. And life in Kotahena with his grandparents, in his grandparents' house, was actually quite disturbing and distressing for Rajan. He was not happy in the school. He was not happy at home also because of his grandmother's constant criticism of Sahadevan, his father. She considered Sahadevan to be inferior and she blamed Rajan's grandfather for making this match between Neela and Sahadevan. She used to make it a point to make fun of Sahadevan and kept on criticizing Rajan at every opportunity she got, even making fun of his appetite, even making fun of the little bit of food that he used to have at this house. But Rajan was very close to his grandfather. His grandfather was the exact opposite of his grandmother. He was a kind man. He was a very gentle man and he looked forward to the fresh vegetables, the loaded basket of fresh vegetables that was sent by Sahadevan every month for Neela's father. So the relationship between Neela's father and Rajan was very good. They were very close to each other and grandfather and grandson, they got along well together. But grandmother, she was the actual controller of the family. The servants, the family members, the sons and daughters, everyone was under the control of this extremely dominating woman. And life was miserable for Rajan, both at home and at school. He was actually very unhappy. And then what happened? Rajan used to come back home and he was very close to his sister Leela. They played together and departure for St. Benedict's and Colombo was something that pained him because he would miss his sister, Leela. And then what happens is Uncle Nanam. It is pronounced Jnanam. I hope I'm right with the pronunciation. The spelling is Gnanam. So Uncle Gyanam was considered to be the black sheep of the family, the failure of the family. His two elder brothers were well settled lawyers. Navam, his younger brother, was going to be an engineer. Saras, his sister, she was also educated. Neela, Rajan's mom, was the oldest. Grandmother hated the fact that her husband had married off Neela to Sahadevan. She considered Sahadevan to be somebody who belonged to a lower class. Rajan's grandmother, as I told you earlier, she was a very proud and arrogant woman, and she kept on taunting Rajan all through his stay there. Now, Uncle Jnanam, he was a genuinely loving man, and he also was not very happy with Rajan studying at this bigoted, rigid religious school called Saint Benedict's. It was a Catholic school, and Uncle Jnanam also was not happy with Rajan studying there. And soon after that, all of them they decided that Rajan should be moved to another school, a much more liberal school, and he could stay at Uncle Para's house. Para, if you remember, is Sahadevan's younger brother, his half brother. Now, Para had found employment as a railway guard, and he lived in a place called Maradana, which is also in Colombo. And Kotahena, Maradana, these are all places in Colombo. Rajan's grandparents, they lived in the better part of Kotahena, and Maradana was considered to be a locality where people belonging to the lower middle class used to live. So Uncle Jnanam, he felt that Rajan should be admitted to a less religious school like St. Joseph's, and already Kantan is Mahadev's son. Mahadev, if you remember, is Sahadevan and Para's eldest brother. He had died along with his wife in a tragic accident, and their son Kantan was now with Para. So it was decided that Rajan also would move to Para's house and he would take admission in St. Joseph's School. And so the changes were made, and Rajan started living with Uncle Para, his wife, and his little cousin Devi and Kantan. And he was happy in that house. Uncle Gyanam was the only person who was welcomed there by Para and his wife, because Para and his wife were also looked down upon by Neela's mother. Not Neela's father, Neela's mother. She was a very proud woman and she looked down upon Sahadevan's family. But Uncle Gyanam did not have any such air. He was somebody with an open heart, with an open mind. And he was warmly welcomed at Para's house. So, St. Joseph's College, the head of St. Joseph's College was Father Lagrange, and he was a botanist, and he was somebody who understood the students very well. He understood their hearts and minds well. The school did not emphasize too much on Catholic teaching and religion, and it was a school for lower middle class students, and who would go on to become clerks and priests in the British colonial system. So it was like a training ground for the clerical staff, which would come up in the future, and they would be employed in the British government's colonial system that was operating in Sri Lanka in that colonial period. So there is a detailed description in the novel of the various subject teachers. Meanwhile, the world outside was embroiled in the Second World War. Some of the teachers and the senior students, they had already left the school. They had joined the army. They had joined the forces. And they were part of the war work. There was a Japanese air raid over Colombo. A few people died and the harbor was destroyed. People in Colombo, they were subjected to evacuations. The schools were closed. And Kandy was the secret headquarters of Lord Mountbatten, the commander of the Southeast Asian Fleet. So A. Shivanandan brings in the larger world into the novel. he tells us about what was happening in Sri Lanka during the Second World War. Rajan's life was actually unaffected by the Second World War. He was happy. Life at St. Joseph's was very uneventful. He was happy in Uncle Para's house. And Kantan, he got along quite well with his cousin Kantan. Kantan had been orphaned at the very young age of 5. And now Kantan was a teenager. He was older than Rajan. But Kantan did not pay attention to studies. He was into gambling. He had failed the exam several times. And so finally it was decided that Para would not be able to pay him attention because Para was working as a railway guard and he would be at home only during the weekends. So Rajan would stay with Para's family and Kantan would move to Sahadevan's house, where Sahadevan would be able to keep an eye on his activities. And that is how the family bond kept on getting stronger, with the brothers relying on each other, taking care of each other. Once in a while, Uncle Jnanam used to visit, and Uncle Para and Uncle Jnanam, they got along well. They would talk about politics and religion, and they would have arguments, but they were friends. Uncle Jnanam explained to Rajan that he was a nationalist and Para was a socialist. Rajan did not understand the difference at this point of time. He was very naive at this point of time. He didn't have any idea about Sri Lankan history. He did not have any idea about the political situation, the larger crises that were happening in the world. He was actually completely naive. He had no clue about what was happening. The happiest days of his life were the 2 or 3 weeks that he used to spend every year at Sandley in Jaffna. Why was this happy? Because that was the period when the father and the children and mother, they would be traveling together in a train, and the journey itself was very exciting. It was very enchanting. Old train journeys, they used to be really exciting. The food used to be tastier, and sharing space in an enclosed space, the intimacy would increase, and he felt very close to his father. His father would be in complete control of the situation. Food would be served on top of briefcase, and they would all have fun eating it together. Then they would play games, and they would get along well with other passengers on the train, look out at the sides. So basically, he looked forward to this journey to Jaffna. And then what awaited them in Sandlipay also was equally exciting because the whole family would be there. The larger family, Sahadevan's family, his sisters' children, everybody would be there. And Rajan looked forward to this get together. This happened every July. And most of the younger generation who belonged to Sandlipay, they were all working in the government sector, and all of them would return with their families in July. So the entire village was filled with children's noises, feasting, and celebrations, and people were very happy during that short interlude. All the people who had migrated away from the village, they would return in July. And Rajan used to love the time that he spent in Sandlipay in Jaffna. Rajan recounts the happy memories of Sandlipay, his father, his father's letters to him. He also remembers the tragic death of Mahadev's daughter, Pushpa, after the death of Mahadev and his wife. The girl had died of meningitis, and Rajan contemplates on the on the deaths that kept on stalking the family, the tragedies that kept on stalking the family. Rajan also remembers the wedding of his cousin Kani, the daughter of his aunt Lakshmi. There had been some disagreement about the dowry, but the marriage had taken place. Sahadevan had made arrangements for the extra dowry payment, and the girl had been uh, wed and she had gone to her husband's place. The next day, Rajan cycled to the house to see his cousin Kani, and when he arrived there, he found that the bridegroom had left the bride on the first night itself. She was sitting there, forlorn and lonely. And he comes back. He tells his father about what he had seen. And only then does the enormity of what had happened strike Rajan. His father and his aunt Lakshmi, both of them, they were shattered. Both of them, they sat on the steps of the house, wondering what to do. and they kept quiet for some time. Then both of them, they got up and they went to the bridegroom's house to sort out matters. It is at this point of time, when Rajan is 16 years old, does he understand the pain that his father felt, the anguish that his elders had experienced because of the situation created by the marriage and the failure of the marriage on the first day itself. Then Rajan also tells us about the arguments between his parents. These arguments usually happened when the salary was about to come, and Rajan's mother used to pester Sahadevan for more money for household expenses. Then, chapter 3. Chapter 3 begins with Rajan telling us about Ceylon becoming independent in 1948. Ceylon becoming independent in 1948. Sahadevan and Uncle Jnanam were talking about it. They were discussing Sri Lankan independence. Sri Lankan independence was closely tied with Indian independence. We got independence in 1947. Sri Lanka got independence in 1948. Most of the Sri Lankan leaders, they were not part of the independence movement. What they did was they were sitting and watching what was happening in India. They were watching the actions that were taken by Gandhiji, by Nehru, by the Indian freedom movement. And people like Gunasinha, they were social climbers, political climbers. He traveled in a chauffeur-driven car, and he made maximum gain for himself. He was completely indifferent to the plight of the people. And Sahadevan's hatred of Gunasinha has increased in multitudes. And there is a description of Gunasinha and his selfishness and his ignorance of the condition of the Sri Lankan people, the selfish politics that was played by Gunasinha. We also learn that Sahadevan and Tissa, they continued to be friends, but not as close as they used to be. Tissa had got married to his cousin Beatrice, and they had a son. And Rajan, he had spent some time at Tissa's house, and but there is a drift between Sahadevan and Tissa. Their politics was different, and now they have drifted even further apart. Sometime in 1947, Sahadevan was transferred to Colombo as chief postmaster, and the family came together once again. Rajan had spent most of his childhood away from home. He was in some or the other hostel, but now the family is together. They are back together. And the Sri Lankan freedom movement mirrored the Indian independence movement with boycott of British goods and the Swabhasha movement and the publicity and promotion of locally made goods. Rajan informs his father that they were taught British history and not Sri Lankan local history. One of their teachers, Mr. Korea, had lost his job because he had taught something out of syllabus. Then they talked about Uncle Jnanam, whom Sahadev had referred to as the mad Indian uncle. Jnanam, he had got a job as a clerk. And what he did was, on the first day itself, he wore the Sri Lankan national dress and a Gandhi cap. And he went and talked to his boss, British boss, Mr. Jones. And he was thrown out of his job. And when he was thrown out of his job, then his mother, Rajan's grandmother, she took him to a Buddhist priest and she tried to get some rituals and mantras done. Instead, what happened was Jnana converted and became a Buddhist priest. When he became a Buddhist priest, his mother was worried. She tried to get him married off. When she tried to get him married off, he ran away to India. But the problem is, his purse was stolen during the crossing and he had to come back. But he did not come back to Colombo. He stayed in Jaffna for a couple of months with his friends. So that is why Sahadevan refers to him as his mad Indian uncle. Rajan's first love. Now that's a very interesting chapter, the section of chapter. And Rajan's favorite book at this point of time was Hear What the Week. He used to read all the books that were there in the shelf of his father's room. Limited supply of books, but all classics. And Rajan's favorite book was Hear What the Way. And he had been reading R.D. Blackmore's classic novel, Lorna Doone. So he fell in love with a girl, Lorna Munasinghe, a Sinhalese girl. He doted on her, he adored her, he spent weeks chasing her, he was bewitched by her. And finally she paid attention to him and she encouraged him She even kissed him, and he was head over heels in love with her. But this girl, she cheated him, she betrayed him, she used him, and she threw him like a use and throw pen. And she called him a nuisance, a bloody nuisance, who used to stalk her and make a mess of himself. Okay, and that broke his heart. And he went into depression. At this point of time, he had appeared for his matriculation exams, but he did not care about his matriculation exams. He was mooning over Lorna Moon or Lorna Moonasinghe. When his matriculation results came, he had passed, and his family was very happy, and they had arranged celebrations. And he confessed everything to his sister, Leela. He told her about his heart being broken, and she told him that he would get over it. He would find other girls. And that is how he moved on after the episode with Lorna Doon or Lorna Moon or Lorna Munasinghe. And soon he got admission into University of Ceylon, that is chapter 4. And Sir Henry Wiggins was the vice chancellor, the VC. Wiggins was the man who had drafted the constitution for Ceylon, and he enjoyed university life. He enjoyed the freedom of being an adult, and he joined the dance club. He joined all sorts of clubs. He joined the music club, and he learned all kinds of Western dance, the foxtrot, and all that. He also joined the Socialist Society, and he also became a member of the soccer team or the football team. And he fell in love with English literature, especially English poetry. He felt that Donne and Keats and Hopkins spoke to him. Their words had a sense of immediacy, had a sense of purpose. He identified with the poets and he felt a special connection with them. Now, his first meeting with Lal, the man who would shape his political ideology. Lal did not actually study in the university. Lal was a medical student. He had met Lal at a rally of the Lanka Sama Samaja party at Victoria Park. And both of them, they started talking. And Lal was Sinhalese and had a rich cousin called Roy D. Silva. This Roy D. Silva, he had a Marxist group, and Rajan used to attend this Marxist group. But Roy D. Silva was actually a pseudo Marxist because he came from a very rich family and he put on the act of being a Marxist. All this is explained to the naive Rajan by Lal. So Lal educates Rajan on socialism and exposes the hypocrisy of people like Roy. And Lal talks about the system making people ashamed of their roots. Hearing all this, Rajan is very disturbed and he wants to get away from Lal because all his convictions, all his ignorance, he's very happy in that. And suddenly, this man is coming and telling him that everything that you believe in is wrong, everything that you see is not as it is. And that disturbs him. But at the same time, a close connection develops between him and Lal. He wants to meet Lal, he wants to talk to Lal, he wants to visit Lal's home because he feels intrigued by this medical student who is such a passionate socialist and whose political ideas are very well informed and well grounded. And then what happens? Both of them, they have a common family friend, a common friend called Kanaiya. Kanaiya was the son of a tea estate laborer. And Lal tells Rajan that Kanaiya, after getting close to Roy, was ashamed of his roots. And that is what meeting and spending time with Roy does to you. Kanaiya actually was someone who was committed to socialist ideas. He was someone who was committed to the well being of others, the welfare of everyone. But after interacting with Roy, he was ashamed of his roots. After this, there is a conversation between Kanaiya and Rajan. Rajan is actually very confused and he wants to uplift his family. He wants to help his family, but he doesn't know how to go about doing it. And he talks to Kanaiya. Kanaiya tells him about Lal's life, about his difficulties, the difficulties faced by the family. And he tells him that Lal's father had died in the great malaria epidemic of the 1930s. He had been an apothecary, a doctor, and he had caught malaria from one of his patients. And that is how he had died. After his death, life had been very difficult for the family. Lal's mother, she used to get a meager amount as pension, and she had a plot behind the rented house where they stayed. She used to grow vegetables there, sell the vegetables, and that is how she supplemented her income. But after a point of time, she wanted her children to have a better education, and so she decided to move to Colombo. Lal and his elder sister, Lalita, who was 7 years old. Lal was five when their father passed away. So they moved to Colombo, and Lal's mother, she found a job as a tailor, a seamstress in a convent. Life was very difficult, and they treated her as a servant, but the income was enough to support the education of the two children. But by the time Lal's mother was 40 years old, she lost sight and she had breathlessness, and she lost her job. So when she lost her job, Lali or Lalita, who had plans, dreams of becoming a teacher, she gave up her dreams and she became an attendant, and she started supporting the family. Both mother and daughter, their only plan, their only desire was to see Lal becoming a doctor. And Lal also won a scholarship to study medicine. Plus, he used to take tuitions for physics and maths. And that is how he used to support and contribute money to the family's well being. So, hearing all this, Rajan is very inspired, and he's actually getting closer to Kanaya and Lal. A close bond develops between Rajan and Lal because Lal is somebody who's very open minded and open hearted. And Rajan wanted to get to know him better. And Lal had a close relationship with a girl called Hema. He used to come to the university to meet her. And then Lal informs Rajan about a hartal that was going to happen on August 12 against the government's policies. And Lal invited Rajan to come home. Rajan actually wanted to have a one to one conversation with Lal about politics, about the situation, and he wanted his inner confusion to be cleared. But when he arrives at Lal's home, he finds that the house is full of people. All these people who are talking about politics and socialism, who are talking about the hartal, the strike, and he doesn't get one moment to talk to Lal. But he is very intrigued by the uh, scenes in that house. And he saw that most of the people were Sinhalese laborers, and he was discomfited by it. And that makes him uncomfortable, that he is feeling uncomfortable seeing these people. And he considers that to be something wrong on his part. He feels guilty about it. And Kanaya tells him about the need for the hartal, the workers, their unions, and also informed him that that Lal kept himself away from all the unions. Now, this was the first time that Rajan saw Sena, Lali or Lalita's would be. He saw Sena, but at this point in the novel, he does not know that Sena and Lalita were in love with each other. He was a well built, handsome young man. I'm talking about Sena. Rajan also meets Lali the first time, the beautiful Lali, the beautiful, sensuous Lalita. As soon as he saw her, he fell in love with her. People across Colombo, they were excited about the hartal. They were excited about the strike. The government was scared. At Rajan's home, frequent arguments took place between Uncle Jnanam and Sahadevan. Sahadevan was against the strike. Uncle Jnanam was supporting the strike. On the day of the strike, Rajan was very confused. And his mother also told him not to get involved in the strike. So he frittered away the morning, doing nothing. And then one part of him, he wanted to go to Lal's house. He wanted to see Lali. He wanted to talk to Kanaya. He felt that he was being left out. But then he didn't go. And later on, when he went, he couldn't see Kanaya. He couldn't see Lali. And he felt bad. He felt depressed. He was actually dejected. And the strike was very strong and successful. It was against price rise. sugar, bread, all these commodities were becoming very pricey. And that was why the strike had been launched. And the strike became very strong. There were fiery speeches across the country, and the government was scared. The government did not know how to handle the situation. They called out the troops, and the troops were given shout at sight orders. And the troops, they shot 12 people dead. So the strike took a tragic turn. But the implications of the strike were still not clear to Rajan. And 2 days after the strike, Rajan goes to Lal's house. And he goes there without realizing the enormity of what has happened. Very naively, he talks to all the people there. He talks to Lal, he talks to Kanaya. All of them, the house is in a very somber state of mood. But he doesn't recognize what has happened. And he keeps on blabbering. He says the strike is so successful, things have worked out. Suddenly, Kanaya becomes very angry with him and shouts at him. He tells him, Sena is dead. And Rajan doesn't realize. So what? So what if Sena is dead? Sena is just another Sinhalese laborer. And then Kanaya tells him that Sena and Lali were to be married the next week. And with that, chapter 4 comes to an end. So I'll catch up with you with my next video, which will be on the remaining chapters of book 2. Hope you enjoyed listening to me. It has been long and I hope you won't find it boring. Even if you find it boring, it should help you to write the exams which are due next week. So all the best to everyone. Thank you.